Hello friends, Jermaine here and welcome to this video. We're going to be looking at Shelf Router, which allows us to implement our own RESTful endpoints. So this looks similar to Express.js or Restify if you've used any of those frameworks from the Node.js camp. And this is a good solution if you found it a bit overwhelming using the Shelf library directly to implement your endpoints. Shelf Router provides a nicer interface to allow us to implement that. If this is your first time to the channel, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you don't miss out on future tutorials demonstrating how to build full stack applications with Dart and Flutter. And without further ado, let's get into it. In order to use Shelf Router, we first need to install it. We can install this using crawl. So open the terminal and I'll run crawl install Shelf Router. And once that is installed for us, we should find that entry over here in our pubspec.yaml file. Alternatively, you can add this here manually and then run pubget in the terminal. Once we've installed Shelf Router, we're going to come to our main Dart file located within the bin directory. And we are going to import our Shelf Router package. We'll also import the Shelf and Shelf IO libraries that come pre-installed with Shelf Router. Installing Shelf Router gives us access to a router object. So I'll create a variable called app, and then I'll create a new instance of router. And then this router object allows us to define each of our endpoints. So we'll do app.get, for instance, and this allows us to define an endpoint that accepts a GET request. So we'll have a GET request to the root of our endpoint, and then our handler is a callback function. This callback function allows us to access the request, like so. And then here we can simply return a response, like so. So we do response.ok, and then we'll just say hello world. And then next, we just need to serve up our router. I'll mark our main function with a sync keyword, and we are going to await, and we'll do io.serve. The serve method from Shelf IO takes in a handler function, which we can access from the router. So we'll do app.handler. It allows us to define an address. We just use localhost and a port. We'll just set 8083. And I'll just save this file. We are now able to go ahead and run this file. So at this point, we have our server running. And we can access our server using curl, for instance. And doing that gives us hello world as our response. We are also able to define path variables for each of our endpoints. The way we'll do that is by using the less than and greater than sign. And then in here, we'll have the name of our variable, like so. And doing this means that this callback function allows us access to a second argument, which contains the result of this path variable. So in here, we can grab that and pass that in here. So if I go ahead and run this file through VS Code, I'm able to access our server like so, and then I'll pass in my name, which gives me hello Jermaine. Now, if I attempt to access the root of our API, we get an internal server error because this now becomes required. To address that, our path variables also accepts regular expressions. So after the name of our path variable, we'll use the pipe symbol, and then we can define a regular expression. For instance, we'll just say any character and we'll do a greedy match, so 0 or more. So if I save that and I restart the server, I'm able to do this one now, which says hello, and then the name part is empty because we did not define the name, plus this regex now makes this optional. We can decide to make this a bit more flexible if I create a variable called param, and then we can check our name argument, and we want to check if it's not empty, then we'll use the name, or else we'll just say world. And then in our response, we'll pass param through like so. Let's go ahead and restart the server, and then let's try that again. Okay, so that gives us hello world. And if I pass in my name, I get hello Jermaine. All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and define another endpoint, which would be another get request. And this will be for managing a list of films. Like so. And the location of our films is in this films.json file that I've got as part of the project. So it's just got a list of auto-generated films with an ID and a title. I'm going to go ahead and load that file in here. And to load that file, we need two of Dart's inbuilt libraries, IO and Convert. And over here, before we instantiate our router, I'll go ahead and load that file. And then I'll decode that. I'll do a JSON.decode to convert it to a Dart list object. So when we hit our films endpoint, we are going to return a response.ok. The body will be our encoded data, because we need to convert it back to a string to send it across. Because the response sent back by default is of type text plain or plain text, we need to set the correct content type by setting the headers named argument, which takes in a map of name value pairs, and then the key will be content type, and then the value will be application/JSON. We can go ahead and test this. If I restart the server, and then we'll curl to our films path. And then we'll find out that rather than going through this one, we get hello films, which is because the way Shelf Router would work is it finds the nearest match. So although /films matches this one, it also matches that one because of this regular expression. So we just need to swap the order of these routes like so. And then I'll restart our server. Let's try again. Okay, so now we got a list of movies back. Let's have another get endpoint for our films to retrieve a particular film. So we'll call it film, and then we'll pass in a path variable called ID. Our handler contains the string ID. Then let's create a variable to contain our parsed ID. So we'll convert it to an integer, like so. And then, based on that ID, we can filter through our films list by doing data.firstWhere. And then for each film, we're going to check that the ID matches the parsed ID. And then what we need to do is to define a named argument, like so, or else. So what we're saying is, if we do not find the film we're searching for, we'll just return a null response. If we do not define this, then this list method will throw an error. So this bit prevents this list method from throwing an error. So it's either going to find the film we want, or it will just return null. So at this point, we can check if film is not null, then we'll return a response. Containing our encoded film, and we'll set the correct headers. I'll just copy that and paste that here. Or else we'll just return response dot not found, which is just a 404, and we'll just say film not found. Okay, let's restart our server and try again. So let's try a film that exists. Okay, that gives us the 18. Let's try one that doesn't exist. Then we get film not found. All right. So far we've defined methods that will run when we make get calls. We can also define methods for other types of calls. So we can do app.post, which handles a post request to our API. So let's define one for films. And I'll mark this one as async. So this endpoint will accept a payload. So we can pass that payload by awaiting on our request. And I'll invoke the reader_string method because we're going to be sending JSON string to this endpoint. Then we can add that to our list of films. So I'll do data.add and we'll do JSON.decode our payload because we'll convert it to an object. And then from that, we can just return the same payload as a response. And we'll set the correct response content type. Okay, let's test this one out. And let me restart the server before I run this. All right, so we got our new entry. So if I go ahead and make a GET request, we have our new entry added here. All right, that looks good. There are other calls we can make, like all, which will target all the HTTP verbs. There's connect, there's delete, there's head, there's options, patch, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to go ahead and have an example just for delete. So this will be to our films endpoint, and that also takes in an ID parameter. Our handler remains pretty much the same. I'll go ahead and pass the ID. And then let's do data.remove where the film's ID matches our past ID. And then we'll just return a response.ok and we just say deleted. Okay, let me restart the server. And let's give that a go. All right, so we deleted that. And let's try and request it. Okay, film not found. And if I do that as well, the film is removed from this list. All right. So in just a few lines of code, we've been able to go ahead and put together a working API server. that we're using to serve our list of films from the JSON file. However, in a production scenario, you'd likely be working with different APIs that are handling different resources. So for instance, we've got this example managing films, but there could be another endpoint that are managing, for instance, actors or producers or directors or, whatever you want to manage. To allow us to implement this in a fashion that is maintainable in the long run, Shelf Router allows us to mount other router objects. So instead of doing all of this for films and then going ahead and defining other ones for producers and directors and so on and so forth, we can create a new router object and then we can mount it on this one, combine it with this router object. So to demonstrate what that looks like, I'm going to come to this file that I've created here, filmapi.dart. And let's go ahead and copy these imports over here. I'll create a class called filmAPI. And this filmAPI will contain our films list from the JSON file. So I'll copy that and I'll paste that here. I'll create a getter for our router object. So in here, I'll create a new router object like so. And then I'll just return that router object we created. This now means that we're able to come over here and copy all of this, or cut all of that. And I'll just paste that here. And we can just rename app as router, like such. And also we can simplify this a bit more by getting rid of films, like so. So now that should look like that. And to use our film API, we'll come back over here and we'll import it. And then we can do app.mount. Mount takes in a prefix. So our prefix will be /films. And it needs to have a / at the end and the beginning as well. And then in here, we can pass in our router by doing filmAPI.router. So doing this now means that if I restart our API server, we can do locals 8083 films / and that'll give us our list of films. And you need to have the / at the end, or else it will just fall back to this one. But we should be able to perform the other operations as well. So here's a post, add in our 11th entry. So I'll add a / at the end of films, and I'll go ahead and add it. So we should be able to query it like such. And that gives us the Batman. And if I do a get, we now see the Batman here as well. And then let's go ahead and delete it. And if I try to query that film, it says film not found. That's good. And if I query all our films, then that entry is not there anymore. So Shelf Router is pretty robust and the learning curve is not too steep. Also with this API, in fact, with this ID here, you can have a regex, for instance, that'll check that the ID is a digit. So at this point now, if I restart the server and I try to access that and I pass something else that isn't a digit, it basically ignores that. And then the request falls through to this one. And in fact, having a route specifically like this one is useful in the case where you have a single page application and the routing in that is mostly managed on the client via the history API. So on the server, you would have a route like this, which will always serve the index.html file that is bootstrapping your single page app. So whether it's Angular or React or Vue, whichever it is. Anyway, that being said, I'm going to leave the video here. This brings me to the end of the tutorial. If you enjoyed it, smash the like button. And if you are not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon next to the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future updates. If you've got any questions about all of this, just let me know. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.